Okay, let's look at example 14. It asks us to solve a cubic equation. That cubic equation is x cubed plus 2x squared minus 11x plus 6. What we need to do first is to find a factor, one of the factors of this equation, or of this function. To do so, we need to use the remainder theorem. We need to find a number that when we evaluate at this function, we're going to get 0. So something that'll work. And we're going to base that off of our last term here, which is 6. We see this is a 6, so, our normal factors are 1, 2, 3, and 6. Okay, so those are, if we were to factor that, that's the numbers that we get. So we can choose from this pool to give us a quick shot to see if any of these will actually work. So, again, like our p of x is our function, which is x cubed plus 2x squared minus 11x plus 6 equals 0. And so we have this. So let's try a few options. So let's say if we tried 1, we would get 1 cubed plus 2 times 1 squared minus 11 times 1 plus 6. This is 1 plus 2 minus 11 plus 6. This would end up being negative 2. So it's not going to work. That one's not going to work. So let's move on to 2. Let's try 2. If we plug this, we get 2 cubed plus 2 times 2 squared minus 11 times 2 plus 6. So we have 8 plus 8 minus 22 plus 6. And that does equal 0. So what does this mean? This means that at the number 2, we have if we were to plug that in, that this number would zero out our p of x function, which means that this is a factor of p of x. We know that x minus 2. Again, this is how we set it up, because we set everything up into ax minus b. If our b over a is 2, then that would set us up in this type of situation. So this would be one of our zeros. So now what we need to do is use this with our p of x function to divide it out so that we can find any other zeros or factors. So we're going to have x cubed plus 2x squared minus 11x plus 6. We're going to divide x minus 2 into it. So we get here, this is going to be x squared. We're going to multiply that down. We're going to get x cubed minus 2x squared. This is going to give us these two terms. The x cubes will cancel, and we're going to end up with 2x squared minus a negative 2x squared gives us 4x squared. So then from here, we're going to know that this is going to be a positive 4x. So when we multiply the positive 4x down, and sorry, I did forget one big important step, that's to bring down the rest. When we multiply 4x by this, we're going to get 4x squared by design, and then this will become a negative 8x. We would subtract these. Negative 11x minus a negative 8 would make negative 3x. Bring down the 6. And then we would get a minus 3 here. Again, by design, we get the same term there. And then this will make a positive 6. And this makes sense based on our results earlier. We should end up with a remainder of 0 because we did the remainder theorem with x minus 2, so we should get a remainder of 0. If for whatever reason you get something that's different, you need to go back and check your steps. So now what we have left is x squared plus 4x minus 3. So for this, we can't factor this. What we can try to do is use the, we can't solve this, but what we can try to do is we can use the quadratic formula. We could use the remainder theorem, or not the remainder theorem, excuse me. We could use completing the squares. The completing the squares method is pretty quick and easy. It's what I'm going to try for this. It's because I have this nice even middle term. It's going to make things pretty easy for me. So remember, completing the square. First thing you do is you move the constant to, and then you add back our square constant to both sides. And then we factor and solve. So for this, we're going to move this term over, and we're going to get this equals 3. Now we have to add back our square constant. We have to fill the hole that's been left here because we're trying to create a square. Well, here, what you do to create a square is you're going to take half of this number, so x plus 2, and you're going to want to square it. And that's going to go down like an extra step or so. Well, if you did x plus 2 squared, this would create a positive 4 that we have to add to each side. And so for this, okay, we end up with this is x plus 2 squared, and this is 7. Well, now we just solve the rest of the way. And we're going to take the square root of both sides. We're going to get x plus 2 equals positive or negative square root of 7. And we're going to get x to equal negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. And these are all of the solutions. We now have all of the solutions. We knew that from earlier that when we plugged in 2, we got 0. But also now, we're going to get that we have negative 2 plus the square root of 7, and negative 2 minus the square root of 7. So you could choose up here at the top to use the quadratic formula. Avoid using answers from the quadratic formula that aren't, like for your calculator, that aren't exact. If you end up with decimal numbers, you may want to go back and try the actual quadratic formula, or using the completing the squares method that I tried. Some other times you'll be able to factor easily, but this was not one of those times. But eventually you'll be able to get all 3 of your answers to your cubic equation.